Well, it's really a pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. Thank you so much for coming out and joining us. There was fantastic energy already outside in the pre-networking session. I am really pleased. I've been with EDHEC for about 20 years as a professor. I spent a number of years as the Associate Dean of Graduate Programs, and just 2 years ago, stepped down from that role to take on the new challenge. My background was math computer science, and when I saw ChatGPT come out, I just thought that is going to change profoundly what we do, and I want to be part of that movement and engage with partners, alumni, EDHEC, educators around the world to see what we can do. So I'm really excited about talking about our subject tonight, which was the replace or reinvent. I think it's a subject that all of us are having conversations around. Do we replace certain tasks? Do we reinvent them? Workflows? What about actually the essence of our businesses? What about our teams? How are we going to go about this? So I wanted to address the question from 4 levels and look at it on an individual level. What is it that AI means in terms of ourselves? What are we going to replace? What are we going to reinvent? What are we potentially going to augment? And where might we risk diminishing ourselves? Look at it from the perspective of teams, whether they be teams in the school realm or teams at work. What are they going to look like in the future? What are sort of the managerial skills that one might need if we're managing hybrid teams going forward? Looking at institutions generally, of course, the institution that I will focus on is EDHEC as an example of an institution, but you can transfer this to any institution. And then more broadly, ecosystems or industries, because we're all part, no matter what institution we're working with, we're all part of a wider ecosystem. And these kind of changes and challenges is not something that's happening in isolation on any of these levels. So we need to look across all of these. So let me begin not just looking at tasks or missions, but ourselves as humans. How is AI potentially impacting our own cognition? In what way might it be replacing or reinventing the way we think? So let me ask, how many of you have seen or heard about the new study that just recently came out from Wharton about thinking fast, slow, and artificially? Anybody? A few people. So just came out about a week ago. How many of, or 2 weeks ago, how many of you are familiar with Kahneman's work on thinking fast or slow? Raise your hands. It's almost everybody. And so we know this. Our cognition, we sometimes make very quick decisions. It's kind of gut feeling, built up through experience, without much deliberation. And our second, system 2, is much more slow and deliberate. And we have to really, it's effortful. We have to step back and try to reason. And what they posit in this paper is that now there's actually a third external system that is becoming part of our cognition, and that's the artificial level. So let me ask you this. How many of you have used an artificial intelligence LLM within the last 24 hours? Everybody. Okay, just about everybody. How about it within the last hour? Okay, even while you're traveling here, you're having recourse to this. So we're all using it all the time, and not everybody, but many, many people. And the idea is to think about, well, what happens when we're using these AI assistants? And so they posit this sort of framework, and then they ran some experiments. And in the experiments, what they used was something called the cognitive reflection test. So this is a test that's used to ask quick questions that people generally have an immediate answer for, and to get the right answer, they have to step back for a minute. Let me just ask you, if you have $1.10 and you need to give it to 2 people, and there needs to be a $1 difference between those 2 people, think in your mind what the answer is. Okay, now think again. So how much should you give to the 2 people? 105 and 5 cents. How many thought immediately 1 and 10? Okay. This is why we have EDHEC alumni, Imperial alumni here. You didn't fall into that trap. But that's the kind of test that was used here. that's the kind of test that was used. And so what they did was they started by just baseline and discovered, okay, people got about 46% of the questions correct. And then they gave them an AI assistant. And the experimental nature of this was that the AI assistant had underlying system prompts that were either giving accurate or inaccurate answers so that they knew what the influence was going to be. And what happened was when the same people had recourse to an AI assistant and the AI assistant was accurate, jumped up to 71%. Fantastic. We've augmented human cognition. When it was faulty or inaccurate, went down by 14% to about 31% correct. So it showed very clearly that there was a defaulting toward what the AI assistant was providing. When we look at the answer for AI was correct or the answer from AI was incorrect, how often did people override it? When the answer was correct, 93% of the time people went with it. 7% of the time, people overrode an incorrect answer. On the other hand, a correct answer. When it was incorrect, 80% of the time, we went with it. 20% of the time, it was overridden. So this has some significant indications to us, because right now, as we're looking at AI, we're talking a lot about how do we build in guardrails? Where do we put a human in the loop? What kind of judgment do we need to make sure that we have in the decisions to which we're having recourse to AI assistants, AI agents, whatever it may be? So I think it's interesting to start at the individual level, think how we might already be impacting our own cognition through these tools. Overriding takes significant effort, just like our System 2 reasoning. You may have even noticed when you're using an AI or generative AI, I'm using AI and generative AI, but I'm talking about generative AI here. When you're using AI, at the beginning, you're using it more for quick answers, kind of System 1. Now we're using AI, and it looks like that's really reasoning, and we see, chain of thought reasoning, which was a thing 6 months, a year ago. Now the models are doing it itself, and so it's also giving a stronger veneer of true reasoning. So the impulse that we may have to override it will be lessened somewhat, potentially. So, Kahneman taught us that fast thinking feels right even when it's wrong, and AI kind of makes that even more irresistible. So what does that mean for students and in education? So the very beginning of this year, so in the beginning of the school year, September, October, we joined up with 6 schools around the world. Imperial's one of them. It's part of our FOAM, Future of Management Education Alliance, and did a large-scale survey, went out to about 2,500 students. We are going to be publishing this in probably another month or two. We're still polishing it. But one of the questions was around what drives you to use AI. And at the time, 2 of the options were concern about falling behind if others use it, and lack of self-confidence in completing tasks without it. Overall, it was about 1 in 10 students were saying that. But when we dug into this, looking at undergraduate, master's students, and MBAs, we saw a much higher proportion already of undergraduates. So it was more like 1 in 4 say that I'm using it because I feel this pressure. If I don't use it, I'm going to fall behind. 1 in 5 are saying it's affecting my self-confidence. And if we bring this back even to younger levels, one of my concerns is that this feeling of lack of self-confidence could start generating a cycle whereby you feel less confident, so you use it more, and you have a more difficult time generating the kind of skills that you need. So for educators, part of the challenge for us is really thinking about, well, what are the skills that we need to do to help students get beyond this, to have the kind of critical evaluation of AI output that's needed, build up their own resilience, want to go through the effort process of actually learning, investing the time and the struggle that one needs to go beyond superficial learning and actually develop substance. Attention management. Attention management, I'll be curious to see at the end of the talk, if in the 20 minutes that I'm speaking up here, how many people are not looking at their phone at least once? I can say sometimes in the MBA class, that's a definite struggle to keep everybody's attention. I'm just kidding, you guys. The judgment that they need. So the judgment that they need is key. So we need to come up with pedagogical instances and activities and experiences that help develop these kinds of skills. But it's not just for students in schools. I think the same is true for colleagues, people in the industry. That's why it's great to have all of you here today to talk about this on a broader scale. I'm now going to go to the next level, which is teams. So teams, on the left, you have Microsoft's Work Index Trend Report from 2025, saying that, well, about 80% of people feel that they're stretched too far. They actually don't have enough time to do their work in the actual workday. About 53% of the leaders say that they're expecting productivity to increase, and 82% of those leaders said they're expecting that to use agents for part of that increase in productivity. So there's strong opportunity and potential to use this technology to be able to solve part of these problems. You know, we're stretched. What are we doing that's mundane, redundant, that we could potentially automate or use AI assistance agents to be able to reduce and focus on more interesting things? When we look at teams at 3 levels, you might now think of yourselves as being a team with your AI assistant. How many of you have built sort of your own AI assistant? Okay, custom GPTs, that kind of thing, to do certain things. How many of you have built a digital twin? Few people. Okay, so we're starting to build our own assistants. And just with your own assistant, there's skills that are involved in that. You have to think about, you know, what do I want to delegate? How can I be clear about this? What guardrails do I want to put in? What kind of accuracy? There are those who are building multiple agents or assistants to assist them. Okay. Likewise, are those different agents going to be reporting back to me? Do they report to each other? How do I articulate what each of these can do? How do I make sure that what I'm producing with them is accurate, is useful? Why am I building them? What's the impact on other people? And we may have teams. Lots of you maybe already, some of you already, probably in hybrid teams, where your teams, you're going to be managing other humans, and all of those management skills for other humans are still absolutely key and need to be developed continually. And that's part of, I think, what education is about, is bringing communities together to build those person-to-person skills. There's going to be a whole host of new skills in terms of, I'm managing now a team that's hybrid. What's the oversight mechanisms that I need to put into place? How does the relationship between humans and AI agents or assistants or whatever you want to call them, how do I manage that? How do I build trust? Where should I have trust? Where should I not have trust? Where do we need humans in the loops? So along all of these different levels, what we're seeing is that at the very basic level, on an individual level, probably starting to develop managerial skills and framing objectives is something that we're going to have to bring in much earlier in curriculums. You know, we've thought of that for years as being MBA level, and it is MBA level. But younger and younger people are going to also need to learn to frame objectives. What's my problem? What am I trying to solve? How can I set my goal? How can I articulate that? In terms of, you know, same as before, the critical evaluation is absolutely key. Having that mindset of testing, iteration, and testing, bringing in judgment, and of course, accountability mechanisms. It was interesting this week with the MBAs. We've gone and visited quite a few companies. Some of them are integrating AI. Some of them are consulting or advisory companies working with companies on integrating AI. And this aspect of accountability, responsibility, building in governance at the early stage has permeated these discussions. Because if you don't start at the design stage, it's very difficult or dangerous to go back to it later. And how do we build those type of skills in our own students? Strategic vision, that's something that we're going to need for any team, and even more so now with these hybrid teams. What are we trying to accomplish? How are we going to get there? And of course, the human well-being management. So there's another study I just want to say 2 words about that came out, again, this is within the last month, from Harvard Business Review. And they've coined a new term called brain fry. So you might have heard brain rot earlier in the year, MIT study about cognitive debt and not remembering anything you did with AI. Well, this is brain fry, which was a slightly different take on this. And what they were looking at was particularly with software developers, and looking at as they are augmenting themselves with things like Claude Code or other AI coding tools, which are excellent. They are doing an excellent job coding. The amount of accountability and oversight that they have has expanded, and they're doing less of the coding themselves and more of this. And so what it was looking at is the degree of exhaustion that was setting in because there was so much accountability and decisions and oversight on a regular basis, and potentially taking some of the joy out of some of the work that people had been doing. We talked about this a little bit yesterday with Doug and the MBA students. So there's side effects. Yes, we can augment the productivity, but we have to be attentive to how we do that and what the impact on people is. When we talk about institutions, higher ed, going to be quite strongly impacted, and particularly business schools. This is a recent study from Anthropic, and what they've done is they've looked at the conversations that people are having with Claude and looking at the type of questions they're asking and for the types of roles. And they had sort of categorized globally based on ONET task classifications across different occupational categories. What is potentially impacted or automatable by AI? And where do we see this is already happening with the evidence they have in conversations? And so if we look at the outside of the circle, management, business and finance, computer and math, life and social sciences, legal, arts, media, office, admin, sales. That's kind of our brochure of the programs that we have. So we really need to think about within all of these industries and occupations, how can we be preparing students to go into these with the proper skills regarding these future roles. But we can't just sit back and do things as usual. We're going to be highly, highly, highly impacted by these changes. Of course, this is from Anthropic. It's only one view from one company, but I am actually rather grateful to Anthropic. They actually share some of the data. What I think is worth considering is the view that one company has on the economic activity and use of AI across so many different sectors and fields and geographies. I highly recommend at least taking a look at that, whether you can take it with a grain of salt, but I think it's quite interesting. So what's EDHEC's approach? Well, we decided to create the AI Center, and with a mission, first and foremost, to integrate AI across our curriculum. And with that integration, that means creating new programs, creating new courses, creating new pedagogical experiences, having our students create their own AI assistants, having them test them, try to jailbreak each other's, understand both the benefits and the risks involved. For our pre-master students, a new course called Me, Myself, and AI. And the point of that course is not to learn how to use AI, it's how to learn to step back and have a reflexive approach to where am I using AI in my learning path? Why am I using AI in that? Is it hindering me? Is it helping me? And try to build that mindset, that growth development mindset that we're not here just for a series of deliverables, but we actually want to learn and develop some substance, and that happens through effortful activity. Things like hackathons, where we introduce students to vibe coding, creating your own products. Again, there, getting that entrepreneurial spirit going. How can we use these? Immersive, personalized learning, where we use a series of different AI interactions, audio, video, orchestrate the memory, so it's very personalized. Students can come back to it. It knows what you've done, what you've done well, and where you might want to go next in your learning activities. And then, of course, upskilling our professors with our AI for Research and Education initiative. We're also starting now to work on some research initiatives, and we've just got started last year and really focused on curriculum. And the research initiative we're looking at right now is looking at what are the managerial skills that are going to be needed in the future or tomorrow to manage these hybrid teams. How is this going to be impacting organizations and structures? And so we're working on a few partnerships in that area now. And again, here, these are very similar skills. And lastly, ecosystem. So across the higher education ecosystem, no single school can tackle this on their own. And so we are one of the founding members of something called the Responsible AI Consortium. I'm delighted tonight to have Jessica Turner, who's the CEO of QS in London, here with us, and also Mike, who's representing Imperial. We founded this with Imperial, Lewis Business School, EDHEC, and QS. And alongside, with 4 pillars, we're working on institutional level AI assessment capabilities. What do higher education institutions need, and where are they in terms of capabilities across things like research, learning, operations? And we're rolling that out, and Michelle Harris, if you want to raise your hand, is involved in the construction of that. We're also doing sandboxes, using tools, testing things out together, working groups on governance and learning and intentionality. So it's really been an exciting process to work with schools all over the world and really come together on this, because we're in the business of developing people, and we want to continue to be in the business of developing people. And we are helping each other ensure that our own educational systems will be resilient to these changes that we're all facing. We're trying to make them resilient. I can't say we're there yet, but we're trying to figure it out together, which is very exciting. So just to close up, the panel that you're going to have this evening is going to go further into discussions around skills that are needed moving forward. And I think a lot of these skills are needed from the individual basis all the way up to the ecosystem basis. You know, accountability, curiosity, mindset, agility, growth mindset, I should say, not just a mindset, growth mindset, collaboration, governance. And so I'm very happy to welcome our panel to introduce you to their perspectives on these topics. And to do so, I'm going to invite our moderator, Michael Knowles. Michael is from Imperial College. As I mentioned, EDHEC partners with Imperial through the Responsible AI Consortium, but we also partner with Imperial through our Future of Management Education Alliance. We have double degrees with Imperial, and we are sharing a lot of experiences through our Idea and Pedagogical Innovations Labs. So we're really happy to have Michael with us this evening. Michael, to give you a brief introduction, so Mike is the director of the Imperial MBA portfolio, so 5 programs, 800 students. Prior to that, he was the director of the leadership program at the University of Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. And prior to that, Mike worked for 20 years at Cornell University, running executive education across 22 cities in North and South America. So with that, I invite you to welcome Mike and our panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and it's an honor to be with you this evening. As Michelle mentioned, we're collaborating in the areas of AI and other areas, and we're very, very pleased to be, and I'll introduce our panelists in just a second, but it's a pleasure to be collaborating with EDHEC. They've been great partners in this, have been spending time up here in London, and as I said, it's a real pleasure to be with you this evening, thanks to EDHEC. You know, this morning I checked the New York Times. First thing, I always take a quick look at the headlines, and I thought it was rather timely that the lead article in the New York Times this morning had a headline: "Job cuts driven by AI are rising on Wall Street." That was the lead article in the New York Times this morning. Michelle presented some statistics up here, a survey about AI is making us 82% more productive, something like that. This article said that AI is making the banking world more profitable. JP Morgan Chase, Citi, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, in the first quarter, $47 billion in collective profits, okay, over the last 3 months. It's up 18% over last year, with a reduction during that 3 months of 15,000 employees. Okay. That's where we're going, okay? That's where we're going, and it's a reality. At any rate, yeah, it makes you pause for a moment, and it caught me for a moment. As I say, it was just kind of timely with coming here, knowing I was coming here this evening. But we are going to talk about this whole issue of reshaping skills, work, and education. And I like the title that EDHEC came up with, the replacement or reinvention. Really, really important. I'll introduce our panelists. Let me just say a couple of quick ground rules. What we'd like is for you to hold off on your questions. We are going to have a Q&A at the end, but there are some materials. We have some great thinking up here, and if you could just hold off on the questions until the Q&A, that would be appreciated. So, what I'd like to do now is introduce you to the people who are building the future of AI. And I don't think that that's much of an exaggeration. I think when you look at these individuals, and I've had the opportunity to have a couple of calls with them over the last few months, I think there's some real insights here that they're going to share with you today that I think have opened my horizons, and I'm certain will open yours as well. So let me start all the way on your left, Karine Alouche-Salnon. Who's our general manager of Busuu and founder of Human Cross AI. She can tell you a little bit about Busuu. It's a language learning app, but Karine had a long history of working with companies like Oracle, Microsoft, NetApp, Coursera. She has a very deep background in EdTech. Next to Karine is Stephen Bennett, who's the agentic AI transformation partner at Artifact. Stephen spent 20 years in the British military, in the Army, leading their digital delivery, and 6 years at McKinsey. Then McKinsey Quantum Black, focusing on agentic AI as well. Next to Stephen is Luca Cassani, head of AI competitive and transformation at Microsoft UK and Ireland. Luca trained as an aerospace engineer and has been at Microsoft for over 10 years. And last but certainly not least, very important to all of us here in education, Jessica Turner, CEO of QS, a company that we talk a lot about, interact a lot with on a regular basis in higher education, certainly. 15 years working with universities on research analytics. Jessica has been at the head of QS for 7 years. If you want to understand where AI is headed, this is the room. These are the people. We asked AI who should be panelists, and AI got very, very nervous. Very nervous. Okay. So let's get started. And these are the people who are really going to be front and center this evening. So let's get started. And I'd like to start, we've talked about some general themes and questions, but we really have not practiced, if you will. So this is going to take, this conversation hopefully will take on a little bit of a life of its own. But we'd like to talk a little bit first about redesigning work and value creation. And specifically, how does AI, especially generative and agentic AI, redefine work, workflows, and value creation? What is the structural shift actually, what's it asking of us? Whether we're in corporations or education, what does it mean for us? And then how do we navigate the timelines, the costs, the resistance that comes with it? And to kick that off, I think first I'm going to ask Stephen to start. And as I say, we'll kind of go back and forth between panelists, and I'll ask the different panelists to pitch in at different times. Stephen?
So if you think of a business, it all comes down to sort of revenue and cost. And AI is going to affect both sides of that equation. Most people think of it as an opportunity to reduce cost and take people out. That is not actually 100% true. It's not even 50% true. Because what we're seeing is, how do I use AI to generate more revenue? Now, this depends on how my revenue is generated. Because if I'm in a quality business, and my quality matters, and my price is dependent on the quality of my output, I can use AI to generate a better quality output. Because I can augment my human with a load of analysis that they wouldn't be able to do, and we wouldn't be able to afford the side of the team, but I've still got this human expertise that sits there that does the last mile. If I'm in a commodity business, I can deliver more quantity, because the amount of work I need to produce a thing is reduced. So that's sort of the revenue side. And obviously, as you've heard that, there is the other side, which is the cost reduction, which is sort of going back to the point made. What you're currently seeing is banks doing it in their back office functions, which are not revenue generating, and therefore they're using it as a cost out opportunity. No business has fully realized the benefit of AI at this point. The reason being is the only area that's relatively mature in AI adoption and use is software. So the SaaS apocalypse that you've read about and the disruption in that is coming to all businesses in the future. It is just there first because for 3 odd years we've had AI. They're early adopters, and also it's a fairly ubiquitous process. If you go to a bank or an insurer or someone else, they follow the same software development lifecycle, pretty much. And so it's easy to fix. If I go to a bank and I ask them how they make a decision on buying particular shares, that is where their value is, and that is where the humans sit. So when it comes to value creation, what I need to be is I need to differentiate myself, and I need to differentiate that by my human capital. So we as humans are going to still remain important because we're the decision makers, we're the people who bring the expertise. There is no way that as much, even with a top-end LLM, it's not whether it can do it, it's the time and effort it would take me to get there. So AI has massively reduced the cost of me producing a piece of software, an agent, all of that. But there is still a cost. The cost of tokens is down about 70%. Token use is up 280 times. So total cost is up 60. Most of the tech companies are not passing that on to companies, but at some point they will, and it will be noticeable on the balance sheet, and companies will ask, what value am I getting for that? So there is a point coming where it is, and if you think of the human in the loop, I don't want to be combining 3 spreadsheets together. I don't want to be doing hundreds of repetitive tasks. I don't want to be sifting through my email box, prioritizing it. I don't want to be scheduling events. I don't want to do any of that. AI can do that. Making that final decision between things that are in the grey, that will cost a lot of money to do, and that gets us back onto 2-year development cycles, a lot of money, and therefore becomes it. So what you're going to see is this focus in terms of human capital on those soft skills, that creative, that is very difficult to do. Remember the video you've all seen of 2 Hollywood actors fighting? And AI produced that. Someone told it produce it. Someone wrote the prompt that produced that thing. That to me is creation. All it did was create the thing that a human asked it to do.
You know, Karine, a lot of the AI conversation revolves around access, access and competition. And the question is who gets left behind? But you've argued that that's not really the proper way to frame that.
I think, as you said before, when you read the article, that's what we're being, showed up, which is all those people are just being left behind. They actually are being erased from a workforce. But as Stephen said, it's actually not so much about the access and who is going to use the tool. It's about how the advantage now is being created with the tool. So many companies at this point can produce knowledge, can produce content, can manage intelligence and scale it much easier and faster than before. However, the way we build advantages, so the value creation that you were talking about, is the hard part. It's the part where you need more judgment. It's the part where you need learning loops. And so all of this is actually something we need to create with humans. And actually, we're talking about attention as one of the rare assets that we have. I think judgment in an organization is going to be what's going to be the scarce resources in the organization. And so today, you were kind of starting to talk about it. One of the elements we've not been talking about enough is the judgment in organization right now. I'm not sure how you learned it. I remember how I learned it. You're in a junior role. You take a task and you do it again, and then you have pattern recognition, and then you're learning, and then you start getting judgment. I'm not sure if it's a fast or slow, but in all cases, that's how we built it. The fact is now we're actually removing a lot of the junior roles in organizations where we're able to learn it. And so while we will create tools and new workflows and ways of operating our businesses, we're actually also removing the way we can get the judgment that we will need in the organization in 10 years. So at this point, this is not too much about, are people going to adopt the tools? Is access the problem? If I'm not using the tool, am I actually, going to have a job? It's actually, are you able to design a system and an organization that is going to create competitive advantages? And so it's a very different mindset. I'm the GM, but GM/CEO of Buzu. My CTO is really AI native. When we go in conversation and talk about the workflows in our organizations, how we're going to design our product, how we're going to, deliver on the strategic outcomes of the organization, the rest of my leadership team is excellent, but they're not AI native. If we're not in the conversation, either him or I, a lot of the decisions about what are the learning loops, where is the judgment going to be held, how we codifying who is taking decisions, this is what is going to make a difference. So if you are not able to think in systems and in that way, which I think you actually highlighted a lot of those skills that we need to bring earlier, in our education, then we will not be able to compete because advantages shift. And it is the humans that are going to be able to design the organizations that are going to build bigger advantages that will win.
We're going to have to move on, but can you give an example of a company who's doing this and doing it well?
We have, I would say, I'm going to use Jack Dorsey and Block. I think, Jack has been looking at, Block, and you have Square, many organizations under this, where he actually been rebuilding his organization with a central intelligence. The central intelligence is actually the place where everybody in the organization have access to the same information that he would, a lot of the first layer organization have, and people are making faster decisions. And they are actually able to create compounding advantages of having this intelligence that is being coded across the organization. So I would say, I'm using this one because you can read, there is a Sequoia article or white paper that was published in March, end of March, and that is actually showing how to think about an organization to create compounding advantages with AI. And so it's about capabilities, interfaces. So it's a very different system than the one we've been knowing today.
Okay, thank you, Karen. We're going to move on to skills and talk about changing demand for skills. And I guess we could ask if work is being redesigned, what skills matter? But I'm going to ask, because there's a lot of MBAs in this room who are going to be graduating shortly, what skills matter now? It's easy to kind of navel gaze and think about the future and try, but let's talk about now. If you're graduating with your MBA in this summer, what are the skills that are important now? And I think I'm going to ask Jessica to take the first stab at that. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, we at QS talk to employers and have done for many years around the world about what are the skills that are most important for them in graduates, and then ask them also which skills they see in graduates, and then assess a skills gap as the difference between those two things. And what we have seen for a number of years is that it is really the soft skills that employers feel to be most important. So in the UK, where employers feel that there's a real skills gap between what they need and what they're seeing in their graduates, the areas where that's biggest are critical thinking is the number one, communication and resilience. And then even when we look at technology employers all around the world, so as we've talked about the technology industry who have really embraced AI, again, the top areas where there are skills gaps for technology employers are critical thinking, communication and problem solving, emotional intelligence, resilience and flexibility and creativity are all the areas where the greatest skills gaps are seen. And so I think that where AI literacy and being an AI native are really important, but it's actually for people throughout their careers, it's really the ability to be adaptable and the ability to use that judgment. And I think that, as Karine said, and as Michelle talked about at the beginning, it's the context which then allows people to use the tools, which will be a new generation of tools in 3 months, in 6 months, in 3 years, in 6 years' time. That is really crucial. And I think it's that learning agility, it's that ability to use that critical thinking that is going to be differentiating. As some of the barriers reduce, it's the people who are keeping themselves incredibly sharp with the way that they're really taking a perspective on the questions that they're looking at, who are the ones who are going to be most successful.
Well, who else? I don't know. Changing skills. Yeah, Kelly?
I'm just going to share something. So you could actually, Buzu is a language learning company. Imagine right now, you can actually have translation literally into your ears. So you could say, Karine, how are you going to get out of business? Or why did you even take that job 3 months ago? The fact is, the skill here is not just a translation of words. It is about communicating an idea. It's about understanding, reading the room, being able to, collaborate, have empathy. And so today, when you're thinking of skills, we're actually even thinking more about the capabilities. What are you going to do with that skill? How are you going to use that skill? And we used to have skills really as a static element. We added it on our resumes. But with how we're going with AIs and just coming back to have with some CLOs, the skills now is something you use, and it's the repetition of what you use. Otherwise, it's kind of decay. The practice of that skill is what is really making a difference. And not everybody is actually ready for that. Because imagine, in the world where before we had roles and we had training programs for those roles, and then we had skill-based organizations, so we finally organized around skills. But now actually the skills and everything we're using is changing every other week. And so at the moment, the skills is really about, as you share it, like being curious, knowing how to relearn, but most importantly, is being open to, new systematic approach to work.
It makes me think of Alvin Toffler, who greatest futurists who ever lived, who said, the illiterate of the 21st century aren't those who can't learn, can't read and write, but those who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. Learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that's so applicable to this situation that we're living through today.
And I'm not sure how it is for you at Imperial, but now the ability to learn by doing, and now the learning is really in the workflow of the real work. It's kind of outside of higher education. It's like whether we want it or not, companies are becoming learning institutions. And so now is how do we create that practice, which actually is one of the challenge even for us. Like we're evolving from language to performing an action in a language. So how do we bring the practice of that skill into the learning process, and how do we bring that into education? Well, right now it is in companies.
Let me ask again whether any of you have any examples to share with us. Is there anything that the audience can take back, tomorrow morning, and they should really be aware of on this question of changing skills? Yeah.
I think the point of like learning and keeping up with the pace is a big one for us especially. Being software the first discipline that has been fundamentally disrupted by AI. I think we're probably going towards a future that is, in some cases, like for a niche, is going to be more polarized, and so deep expertise is more relevant. But how many are the top-notch AI researcher in the world? Probably a few hundred. The rest of the broad economic context is probably going to move back from deep specialty, that there is the legacy of the Industrial Revolution, if you want, and it's going to move to more generally system-wide thinking, soft skills type. A lot will depend also on how organizations redesign themselves. And so I don't think we have all the answers, because at the moment we're living a moment where a disruptive technology is entering the workforce and the economic system, and organizations and workflows are still designed for when this technology didn't exist. And so skills will evolve as adoption and diffusion will scale. But I think the point on more generalist, more humanistic skills is probably going to be true for the next few years.
Stephen?
I mean, I think for me, the number one skill is critical thinking. Because whatever happens, the human's role is going to be to make the final decision. Like, I know that in 5 years' time, AI can pretty much do anything. Like, so it's not a question of can technology do it. But I've been here before. Docklands Light Railway proves that we can have self-driving trains. But we don't have self-driving trains anywhere except on the Docklands Light Railway. Why? Because we as humans made a decision about how we're going to use technology. That is still the case going forward. I cannot see a future where we are going to hand the keys. And in all my discussions with all the clients I have, the number one conversation we have is where's the human in the loop? Which means that human is making a critical decision, which means they need critical thinking. Like I started back, you can tell how old I am, like to use a computer, I had to learn MS-DOS prompt. There was no graphical interface.
Typewriting was a job back in the days.
In fact, I can tell you a story about that. But effectively, that's how it was. So the barrier to entry for using a computer was relatively high. If you didn't know how to use it, you couldn't use it. If you didn't know the keyboard shortcuts to use WordPerfect, you couldn't bold a sentence. There was no button to press. We've made that much simpler. You know, a 5-year-old can now use a mobile phone. Remember, that is going to happen to the AI tooling you've got. So, like, today it's really helpful if you can build your own skills. Like, the AIs will do that now. My data scientists used to spend ages developing stuff. They don't now because they just use a tool. The front end, we just ask Lovable to produce it. Like, that is the pace of change. So I would focus on the soft skills. I think, anything you learn about using a particular tool now, I don't know whether Claude will remain the top LLM or whether Gemini will overtake it or Microsoft will overtake it. All of our systems are designed to swap the LLMs in and out because we think it's going to change every 6 months. So learning a specific thing is quite difficult, but learning how to make a decision, what facts I need to do, because you need to tell the machine how to think about this problem. That's what you need to tell it. That's what it can't do.
Yeah, I think that, as an organization, the strategy becomes even more important, of course, always, because you've got to understand what are the real competitive advantages that you've got in a world where the barriers to entry are reduced and where there are, so many people who can just independently code the kind of applications that you are spending money to develop, and therefore the kind of distribution networks that we have, the kind of brand affinity that we have, the networks that we put together, the ability to bring people together for face-to-face interactions, those are the things that won't be able to be replaced and that won't be able to be replaced quickly at scale. And yet for many things that we do as an organization and for many of the organizations that you work for and lead, I think, that the cost structures are going to be changing. We have to be competitive by really thinking about where we're going to be spending our money, and we've got to be really honing that sense of competitive advantage. And if you think about why do people continue to need to go to business school, it's because you're in an environment where you can be thinking about these things and you can be in a space where you can be really honing your kind of strategic thinking in a way that, as a leader, you're going to need that even more than you've ever needed it before, because a lot of the structural barriers are really being broken down.
So we've heard some, and I think there's some commonality between what we're hearing here about those critical thinking skills and so forth. So let's talk a little bit about building the AI skills ecosystem. And, how do we adapt collectively? Universities, corporations, government, and what's actually driving that change, or is it being driven? And I'd like to start by asking Luca, and your public-private partnership with DSIT was launched a few months ago. Can you give us a few insights from that?
Yes. So UK government at present believes in AI as one of the growth lever for the UK economy. And so a few months ago, they announced an AI skills boost program. The objective from government is to upskill 10 million people by 2030 in applied skills that are relevant for people in the workforce. So think of it as a programmatic, system-wide workforce transformation. Why did they approach the private sector, and why is Microsoft one of the founding partners? From our point of view, we call this Skill the Nation. A couple of points, I think. One is the scale and the speed at which AI is entering the workforce. So traditional programmatic institutional education programs probably are not capable of operating at the scale and speed that is required. Consider again the fact that every quarter at least there is what feels to be a seismic shift in this technology. And so that's the first part. The second part is that to date industry owns the narrative and tools are, at the end of the day, what delivers economic impact. And so it's way lower down into the applied skills education space than in the traditional, more academic, if you want, education. And so the government established this partnership through the Department of Science and Innovation and Technology. We've been founding member. Our commitment to the UK economy is to commit to skill 1 million of those 10 million that the UK have set. The idea is that the private space, companies like Microsoft will provide access free of charge to content, tooling, and standardize in a way on badges and recognition that can then be utilized by whoever participated in the upskilling program. For us, is a fundamental belief of skilling as a force multiplier of social mobility, and in a way the commitment to keep the UK economy at the forefront of AI innovation.
Yeah, that's not always easy, but thinking about the different interests and diverging interests of the various different parties. So where are the biggest challenges in those kinds of partnerships?
I mean, it's I think it, in a way, there has been a good alignment on trying to see the bigger picture and like what is the objective of government, and how private organizations sort of like, I wouldn't say put profits on the side for a moment, but there is a fundamental belief on what's the reason that, what is the license to operate of a company like Microsoft in an economic ecosystem like the UK? And sometimes the license to operate you have, and to then access the profit that you're generating is dependent on being a good citizen. So I think there is a lot of that. It's not to say there are no complexities, but there is a bit of a higher mission or purpose, I think, that we're trying to stay true to.
Mm-hmm. You know, an example I like to cite is think about the development of COVID vaccines. You know, we can go back to 2020, 2021, and so forth. And it's very easy today, of course, to be very cynical about government, about the way various different parties and actors in the world are selfish, think about themselves and so forth. But if you think about the development of the COVID vaccine, that at breakneck speed, and there was a fair amount of AI involved in the development of those. I mean, here in the UK at Oxford and at CDC in the US and so forth, but universities, government, private corporations, all collaborating together. And you know, that can renew a little bit our faith in the world, when it's, as I say, it's very easy to be cynical, but it's true that when the pressure is on, and you know, in this case, human civilization is being challenged in a way that we haven't seen in a century. It's amazing the things that can get done at such a rate. So it is possible, but the incentives have to be, of course, very, very strong. In this in this session, we're going to talk a little bit about, you know, the AI talent pipeline. What does the pipeline look like? If AI is doing most of the work, you know, where do humans still build real expertise and get their real experience? We were talking a little bit about this just before the panel, Karen and I, a little bit about, you know, where does that real experience come from? We were talking about medicine and pilots, airplane pilots, and so forth. So what are the risks and opportunities as LLMs grow more powerful in this? And a little bit about, can I ask each of the panelists to comment on this, about the AI talent pipeline, and that's what's going to be important for the future. Yeah.
I think overall, I'm very optimistic about what's coming forward, even though it doesn't look like it. It's the transition is chaotic, and it will get worse before it gets better. But as you said, Stephen, we're the one creating the tools, and we've not recomposed yet the careers, the jobs, the education, and that recomposition is to come. And as we drive this recomposition, humans are going to be important in a few key areas. Is how can they build, how can they decide, and how can they judge on AI. So that's the positive side of things. Now, however, without recomposing, right, in this non-recomposed time, which everybody's working on, thinking how are we changing our courses, what are the new skills, everything, we might be creating a generation of future workers, entrepreneurs. My daughter is here, so I'm looking at her. That will enter the workforce where they never had actually to go through something difficult to actually know how to judge and how to decide. And it is our responsibilities, I would say, as an ecosystem, of how do we keep integrating this type of activities and judgment to build the future generation. I was at ASU GSV, one of the largest education conference in San Diego last week or the week before. And we were starting actually to discuss, even, it's like with Google and other players that have some of the LMMs, is how can we start integrating frictions within the tool, right? Like areas where you actually have to redecide or stop so that it's not as easy to get an answer. And so how do we create for ourselves as a CEO? I'm thinking, how am I keeping some of those junior roles, or how I'm gonna create that talent pipeline? Is it a junior role? Is it something else? And from a tool perspective, how are we going to create that friction so that we actually have this judgment and the thinking that is happening? And then how are we going to support, from higher education of integrating those practices on real life that they will have to use? So I think for me, this is where I'm thinking this is not a CEO's jobs. This is an ecosystem jobs right now in this time where we're in transitions.
Stephen, I think you had mentioned earlier something about broken ladder risk. Do you want to comment?
See, there isn't much that's like agreed when it comes to the future and what AI is going to do. But most people agreed that if you look at an organization, it will no longer be a pyramid, it will be a diamond. A diamond in terms of the skills that we're going to have. So we're going to have a lot more sort of middle level skills that are driving it, and underneath them we won't have doers. So I spent a lot of my time at McKinsey worrying about manager to do, like non-doer to doer ratios. So 30% managers, 70% doing the work. That was the game, and if we get them there, that's really good. Most organizations were like 50-50. The reality is that doer bit is now a load of agents, and it's agentic AI, not AI, that is going to cause the disruption. Why? Because I can orchestrate a load of agents together to do an entire process from beginning to end where I only need humans as checkpoints. I can actually do the whole thing in agentic if I want to, but we're not going to. So the question becomes then is how, as the other panelists have said, how do I get to that middle tier? There's a couple of things that, and I generally concerned to this because my son is 14 years old, so he will be hitting the job market just at the end of this disruption. For me, there are two bits to play. The time it takes you to get from a novice to a medium sort of skill level, rather than expert, isn't that long. To get from medium to expert is a lot longer. So if you think of that triangle not as in time spent in an organization, but in skill, it isn't unexpected that people will move up quite quickly, because it's not the level in the organization, it's the skill level you have, it's your expertise. That's what the diamond's describing. We just normally assume that expertise means higher level. We've got to get rid of that. The other thing, and sort of you touched on this, we know that the quantity of output that an AI will produce will swamp a human being. I know that. So I'm going to fix that problem because I'm going to have to. And we're already fixing it. So, and this is like a super straightforward example. We got asked, can you convert an org diagram of a company, so like all its companies and all its company names and all the geographical locations. There was 120 different entities in that org chart. The LLM extracted them all, presenting them back to the human. We did not ask the human to check 120 entities. We asked it to check the 5 that were slightly blurry in the picture, and the LLM couldn't quite extract them. And what we did is we presented it as a percentage and basically automatically accepted. That's what we're going to do. We're going to enable that, assist you in critical thinking, that learning. And that means that you will still be doing stuff. You just won't be doing the nugatory task of combining stuff together or writing all of those, like line by line going through a picture. You'll be presented, here's the picture, here's my output. Can you check these things? And therefore, you'll still be doing an element of doing. It's just you're doing 20% of that work, which I hope would be enough.
Luca.
I mean, I think maybe I'll give you an example of what both Steve and Karina just said in their remarks. Just to make it practical, I think some of these problems we're going to encounter, and it's up to business to catch them and to realize them. And I think it might be a definition of who's going to stay in business once the dust settles a little bit and the disruption is no longer a disruption, it has become business as usual. We spoke about how software development is the first information worker or cognitive work profession that has been fully disrupted, and there are roughly 70,000+ at Microsoft. Within a year of the disruption happening, we realize, okay, what does this do to the longevity of the company and the health of the talent pipeline? And so what we did was, well, as people, for us, the key thing was, in the pre-AI world, you join out of uni, the time it takes for you to do a PR, so to publish your code to a production system, the shorter it is, the better it is for retention because you feel empowered. And so what we used to do, give you something super simple, but that hits, whether it's Word, Office, whatever it may be, it gives you fulfillment and it gives you encouragement to go forward. And as you fulfill this task and complete this task, you create mastery, and mastery is what you need to grow. Those things are no longer needed, so your first task is way more complex and your time to commit is longer. And you're not building the level of mastery that you need, as Steve was saying. So we intentionally slow down the process, and we introduce a parallel process where you effectively split the doing the work and the learning as two separate cognitive activities. We created a second AI system that is actually providing tutoring effectively and small tasks that you do on the side, not as part of your core job, that are still useful to create the mastery. So I think it's an example of where deliberately you decide to go slower to what AI allows you to do because it's long-term more beneficial than actually accruing all the value today.
Thank you. And Jessica, I'd be interested a little bit about in your comments about the AI native talent opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as we think about the 14-year-old progressing into the workforce, there's something that's, very intimidating about that in a world of AI where you don't know if the job that you're thinking about is even going to exist by the time you've gone through your university degree. But at the same time, as somebody who's AI native, you've got a real advantage. You can be using AI to teach yourself the skills much more quickly than somebody who's been in the workforce for 5, 10, 15 years has been able to acquire them. You've got the ability to be using the AI with your experience level in a way which is quite a compelling combination. When you think about the economics of an organization, where you've got that diamond-shaped organization, who are the people who are going to be in that middle layer, who are really applying their expertise, who are going to be, taking the accountability, because this is all really about judgment and accountability. And somebody who's been very thoughtful, real critical thinker, who's really, got great learning agility, who's worked with AI for a period of time, can be much more cost effective for an organization than somebody who's been in a role and doesn't have that learning agility. So I think it's going to be a very competitive, workplace for many people. But I think for people who are starting out, it is, again, the curiosity and the judgment, which are the things that are going to really differentiate people. So I think, we don't know how things play out, but the fundamentals of what we should all be doing to make ourselves better at doing our jobs than AI would be, better at doing our jobs than somebody else with AI would be, and better at doing our jobs than we were last year, that imperative is just continuing.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. And what we're going to do now is panelists aren't going anywhere, but I'm going to ask, first of all, Michelle to come up and join us. We're going to move into the Q&A, and I'm sure that there's lots of ideas and questions out there. I have a lot myself, but I'm going to leave this time to you. I'd ask you, please, and what I'll do is we have some students who are going to bring around mics. Please wait until you get the mic because this is being recorded. So even if you have a strong voice, please wait until you get the mic. If you could just introduce yourself, and I'd ask you, please, to keep the question concise. We want to get through as many as possible, so keep it pointed, concise, and you could either address it to one of the individual panelists based upon some of the thoughts they shared with you this evening, or you could open it up to each of them. So with that, who would like to take the first question? Okay, we have someone back here. Yeah.
Should I stand up?
Yeah, why don't you stand up, introduce yourself, and pose your
Hi, my name is Stefan from EDHEC, MBA student. Thank you so much, first of all. My question is about the workforce and the change in the workforce, because you said that the, let's say, organization is changing towards a diamond, and I was wondering, especially on the junior level, if AI is cutting down on the junior positions, how do you get to the middle of the diamond when there are no junior jobs anymore, and how do you build your experience within a company? Thank you.
Oh.
The $1 million question. So I don't think I have the answer. I think we all have a piece of the answers. But one of the things I'll say, for my organization at the moment, when we're doing a recomposition exercise right now. We're saying this is the organization we have right now. Those are the strategic goals. Those are the workflows that we're working through. This is our existing team, and those are the future roles that we'll need, and the capabilities and tooling. And as we do that, we realize we have 3 types of roles that are coming up. So we have architect roles, like people that are building. We have oversight roles, people that are checking. And I said 3 roles, and then one is just going away. But one of the things that is, coming up for us too is that not everybody can architect their job today because they were actually doing their jobs. However, we're looking at if we don't have if we don't have some of the people doing the role in the future, or if we need to bring more people, which we realize we need actually more medium people that we used to have, like we need to have more people with judgment that we actually have today, is how do we bring our team there, or the people in our team that wants to develop there. And so we don't have all the answers today, but this is one specific exercise that we're going through with our HR team, our leadership team, on saying, okay, how are we going to have tasks and projects for a certain team of people where we can continue to develop them in the areas we know today that we will need more judgment on tomorrow. The big questions we have, and you probably have seen it in market, is how much we build versus how much we buy. Today, someone in the team that I bring that have an AI native background versus someone in my team that do not have it is about 40 to 50% more in salary in my team. So that's very costly. So there's a real business case of building the skills in my team, which, by the way, then maybe they'll get 50% more outside, but that's another problem. So for a company, we're becoming, whether or not we want it, a learning institution.
I mean, I've had 3 different organizations I worked for, and the answer's different for all of them. So my army, like, I'm sorry, I'm still going to have to deploy people. It's a human interaction thing. So AI doesn't really affect it in the same way as it's not going to disrupt massively plumbers and electricians. Like that. McKinsey's view is we will reduce the number of BAs that we have, business analysts direct out of school. We are not going to reduce the number of associates we've got. We're not going to reduce the number of managers we've got, because we will generate more work. And therefore, as a partner at McKinsey, I will have more teams working for me, and those teams will be smaller. So rather than being EM engagement team lead +2, it becomes team lead +1. But there's more of them. So like, ultimately, my current company, say $1 billion, so it's a unicorn. We just got bought, so Cinven's our private equity backer. We intend to be 10 times the size we are today. Our population, our head count is not going to get 10 times because AI will enable us to do more. But I am still hiring. And I'm hiring at junior, senior, manager, the whole stack. Because whilst each of my individuals can do more, as an organization, they're not doing 10 times more the work. They're doing 1.5 times more work. So like, this is the bit, is like, what we don't know is the output going to increase enough that the job market still stays where it is? Or is there a plateau to the output? History sort of says that there seems to be no limit to the output. And therefore, what we're going to do is keep generating more and more and more. And if we're going to do that, we'll still need more and more humans. Those humans will be doing more. But that is the look back in history, that's what's happened ad infinitum.
Good evening. My name is Alvina. For us who are already in the workforce, what examples or advice could you give us to be leading by example on the AI? And as a starting point, I'm going to bounce on what Luca mentioned earlier about the 10 million UK government plan. I actually happen to know about it, and I'm saying happen because I really don't see it communicated anywhere, so I still don't understand how they're going to get that done. But I went on the website, I found painfully a training from Accenture. I picked thinking this is generic enough so I can learn something, and specific enough so it's different. Yes, and I'll let you continue.
So, I mean, on that, maybe first on the practicalities, I think there is a bit of infrastructure that needs to be created, which is also why the public-private partnership came into play. Like, how does government leverage private infrastructure to scale? There is a website at Microsoft where you can find all that type of content that is bespoke to the Microsoft tooling. In terms of how do we talk to organizations on how to prepare their AI journey, we talk about the people side and the need to build an AI academy or building AI literacy. And I really think about like 3 different personas. Leaders need to know enough about AI to be able to reinvent their domain. And the domain expertise is the most important part, plus enough understanding of what AI can do. And to be honest, those skills, like those leaders have been reinventing their domains over and over again with every different wave that happens. So those skills are still relevant. You just need to learn how to apply them to a different technology. Then you have general literacy, and I think the the UK program is probably more targeted towards that. It's very applied. It's like, how do you become more proficient at your work? And in some cases, how do you can create for yourself lateral move opportunities? As we said, AI can speed up the acquisition of new skills. And then there is the technical side. So if you are in development and delivery, sure, then you need to learn something new. But AI is the most democratic technology we've seen so far. So you don't need to be a proficient or professional software developer or machine learning engineer. You just need to know the basic of prompting, and you just need to have a lot of domain expertise to understand how you re-engineer a process, a business process with AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's been a change over a long period of time where employers have been less willing to be providing all of the learning that's needed, and a lot more of that has gone on to the individual. And you've seen that in different professions, and what that has meant is that while people are studying, the ability for them to get work integrated learning experiences, the ability for people to start up their own companies, to get all of those experiences, which then differentiates you enough to go out into the job market with a set of experiences that is different from, you know, all of the other graduates in your class. You know, that's been a trend for a long period of time, and as employers cut down on graduate programs, and as some of that onus for responsibility is transferred from the organization onto the individual, I think, you know, as you say, that exactly what you're doing is exactly the right thing to do. But I think it's easier because of the more democratic technologies. I mean, for individuals to go and get themselves a training program, there's been barriers to that. It's been expensive, etc. Whereas actually, I think, you know, because of the availability of technologies and the ability for people to be ensuring that they are really up to speed themselves, the bar is going to rise for everybody of what you're going to be expected to know and how useful you're going to be to an employer at the point when, you know, you're looking to take on a role. And therefore, I think that dynamic is going to continue to shift.
I would say probably just outside of the tools, system thinking is very important. Understanding data is very important, because as you're thinking about your areas of expertise, if you can codify more of what you do, if you can measure it with data, and if you can apply some design thinking principle to it, then you're actually creating an environment for you to have AI as your team. Like as we were saying, we have hybrid teams, then you create your own teams. Hopefully your company is providing you with some of the tooling to do it. If they don't, then don't do it on your company's data outside, but do it on something else in your life, right? So that you actually create your own skills. Because and apply it on, you know, we all have a system in our life that we need to manage, specifically if we're a mom with kids or we manage a home. So that's something you can already apply, but I would say really design thinking, system thinking, data, because they are infrastructure of making an AI organization work.
The panelists are going to join us for the networking reception, but maybe we'll take one more question, or two more questions. Okay, our timers are being generous. The lady here? Yeah.
Hi, hello. Thank you so much for your sharing today. My name is Paulina and I'm a current student at EDHEC MBA. So one question kind of to continue the conversation around AI, building new skills as well as learning. What would be the role of the companies? Jessica, as you mentioned, right now, companies kind of switch that responsibility from themselves towards the individuals. And I was wondering whether there is a certain role for the companies to play in terms of dedicating more time for the workers to actually learn, relearn, unlearn. Because right now, if more work needs to be done and more projects can be done, then the time will be occupied by work, and then will there be time created for learning, or individuals will need to take at their own expense after work, trying to squeeze on the weekends? Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the dynamics that I really enjoy in our company is that there's this sort of impetus from so many different places. There's so many of the people who work with our teams all around the world who have got ideas, who are using AI in different ways, who are driving the innovation within the organization, at the same time as from an organization's point of view, we're making sure that we've got the right either specialist process re-engineering and in some of the core processes across our organization, and that we're giving people the training across the organization that allows them to be really efficient in using AI with a set of tools that is relevant. But it's both the individual's sort of initiative and the company's initiative that come together, and there's a lot of therefore decisions that you need to make about what tools are we going to be allowing to be used in what context, what are we going to pay for, etc. And I think that sort of really creative process is forcing us all to figure out where the opportunities are. So I think that the competitive environment for jobs will raise the bar, but at the same time, companies absolutely need to be taking the lead if they're going to be able to exploit the economics and to be staying competitive in the industries. And I think those dynamics are going to continue to change over time.
So overall, I've seen two types of approach in the companies. One I prefer than the other. I'm not going to say which one, but yeah, I guess you're going to find out quickly. One is, let's adopt tools. And I used to work at Coursera. Let's have a Gen AI Academy lending to our teams, and let's define what it looks like. And in 6 weeks, when it's actually going to reach the team, it's going to be outdated. Some of the biggest problem of the learning organizations right now, and why they're also pushing it back to the individual, is because by the time they're going to develop a program, it's going to be outdated by the time it reaches the individual. The responsibility of the company is not so much on the adoption of the tool, is how we redesign and recompose the organization. What I can tell you from my team, and I think I have someone from my team here in the marketing team, I'm asking each of my leaders to be builders and users of the tool. And we started by creating, it's like a duo with an AI native engineer in each of the team. I'm now actually putting a data engineer in each of the teams. But the goal is for them to be independent within 6 weeks, so that they know the tool, they understand what they have. We will probably come back when we need to give a little more update, but the organization needs to create the environment and the direction in which the role of the person is evolving. And so the pushback I got from my marketing lead this week, and I have someone from our team here, was like, my team is telling me we don't have enough time. I'm like, okay, take the time next week. Take a day. Take 4 hours. I'm like, and she said, yeah, but the other persons are not going to be available. It's like from the engineering team. I'm like, are you not able to show it to your team? We need to lead from the top. And that's one of the things I think as leaders in organization, the learning is actually coming from the leaders themselves with the rest of their teams. And what I'm telling them, though, is don't worry, you can have someone, an engineer, a data engineer, that are going to be connected to your teams to facilitate it. But at some point, things are going to go so fast that the person that knows the job needs to be able to learn for themselves. And so it's just like helping the beginning of it, but really providing also that mindset that you're going to be the one that's going to learn the most because you will know what you need for your role. And so it's not the fact that we just don't want to help, and we're just leaving the responsibility on you. Is actually that's where it should sit, because things are moving so quickly.
Michelle, do you have something to?
I would just add, one of the things I think that can be really effective is communities of learning. And many of the companies, and it's the same internally at EDHEC, we have some people who are really keen and who have been testing things out and been trying them. And we have a meeting every Friday for an hour and just get together, and somebody shares, I tried this out this week, but this is what I've done. And so instead of
feeling, intimidated or behind or lost, we're kind of upskilling each other, and I think it's broadening horizons internally of what is possible with these tools, because it can be quite scary at the beginning if, and you see some people who are much more advanced than you. So leveraging even the people maybe who are not the leaders, but who are keen and experimenting and giving them a space to share what they've done that may inspire others, I think can be a really useful way to approach this. I completely agree. One of the challenge is you're trying to build formal programs, formal courses. As I said, prompt engineering, very cutting edge 2 years ago, and 6 months later, it feels old fashioned. So the kind of the formal creation of these learning instances is challenging, and you will certainly have people working with you who are keen and are going faster than you, and usually willing to help and share and help develop others. So I would encourage testing along those axes.
I think McKinsey last week or 2 weeks ago published a manifesto. The last point was relearn like your business depends on it, like make it relearn like your life depends on it.
Okay, last question before, yeah, please, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Charlotte. I work at ServiceNow, so a SaaS company, and I used to be in strategy consulting until like a year ago at BCG. So I have a question that's linked a bit to actuality, to news. Today, Meta said that they will track mouth and keyboards of employees in the US to train AI agents. So basically see what humans are doing to then train the agents. So it's not said in the article if they want to replace the human, but we kind of understand that it's a way to really understand exactly how the humans think and act in specific circumstances to then train the agents. And therefore I have a question that's very broad, but what's the limit in a way to that? So this is in the US, it's illegal in the EU. I'm pretty sure it's also the case in the UK, but still companies like Meta, which are like huge companies, are doing this. So yeah, what's the limit and how can companies, corporates help on this way?
So, I read that. And Luke, you can come in. I don't understand why they're doing it. I don't. Like, what is where a person moves a mouse and the keys they press, how is that going to enable me to teach the machine how that person's thinking? The gap is how I think, not how I press keys, etc. And there's no way for us to extract that. Well, unless we get like a mind reader, I think we're a long way from that. but genuinely, the genuine limit is if I get asked, say if I go to a private equity company that's deciding whether to do a deal or not, billions of pounds at stake. That decision is made by an investment committee, a room full of people. If I ask them how they made that decision, they will not be able to tell me. They will give me an answer, but if I run that as like an input and output set, it won't ever ring true. And that's the issue, is like we're using a whole load of stuff. When you make a decision every day, you're making that decision based on a load of stuff that you don't know you're actually inputting to that decision because you're using your intuition. That costs a lot to extract, and that's what we term it artifact data lineage. How do we build that? And the only way we can build that is every decision that's made, the AI has a go, and then the human explains to the AI why that's wrong. And at some point then it's learned to think like that human, except I've got 20 humans in an investment committee, all with different inputs. That's the bit. And I just genuinely don't understand why they do it. I wouldn't ever do it. It's a point that I don't. Anyway, Luca.
First of all, I didn't read the article, so I'm thinking on my feet. I agree with what Steve said. I wouldn't see how you build a new and better AI that overcomes the limitation of diffusion in an enterprise context by looking at people clicking mouse in a one-to-machine experience. the thing that we need to overcome is the collective knowledge and human interaction bit. Exactly the example that he gave on an investment committee. Maybe those type of technology and techniques have been used before in operations heavy, like contact center, for example. If you're trying to reduce the average handling time, because at the end of the day, that's cost, there have been technologies that look at how you click, how many times you jump from one system to another, how long it takes you to authenticate. That's all time you're losing that is non-productive. Maybe they're thinking about creating a new user interface that is AI native, and they want to understand what are the limitations of the current user interface, because that's the other big thing, like OpenAI partnering with Johnny Ive, is the devices we have today are not born for the AI era. So do we need to reimagine the human interface? Maybe that would be the only logical thing I have, but otherwise, fully on board with it.
Okay, I think we're going to have to bring this part of it to a close. I would like to ask Doug from Potera to come up, and they've been very generous in supporting this event this evening. So,
because it's more time
please,
between you and your
please.
Thank you. I think you're a largely French audience. I can make my favourite dad joke, which is to my friends, I'm Doug, or ice cream, because in French, du glace is ice cream. So anyway, there's my joke. Thanks. There's not much left for the guys to, because of the panel discussion I thought was fantastic. The company that I work for has bases in Amsterdam and Istanbul. I say that only because I work with a lot of Turkish people, and Turkish have expressions for everything. And one of my favourite is, don't change the horses while you're crossing the river. And the idea is that in turbulent waters, you don't change the thing that's driving you forwards. But my reflection of the world we now occupy, thrilling and terrifying at the same time, is that we're forced to change the horse at the same time. And the reflection that I have working with companies who are into big programs, big transformations, is we need to ask more the question of, are we landing in the right place when the target is moving? So the example is 2 years into a 5-year transformation for a field force team, optimizing the sales reps and how they go and sell to customers. But they're not asking the question, what does that customer look like? Is there even a procurement buyer there by the time you get your new digital ecosystem ready? And so it leads me to two thoughts. One, to echo the points on the panel, strategy becomes even more important. So strategy being a set of assumptions, critical thinking, predictions, and belief of where we need to land to win. And people who can do that, that's the value. And the second is we need to collaborate in different ways. So the sales team need to sit down with procurement and say, how are you going to buy in the future? And I think as companies, it's important to collaborate in different ways. And so we have a QR code. Have a look. This is how we work with our clients to build their transformations and help them make sense of how AI needs to be integrated into their workflows, and a ton of use cases. So do that as an open kitchen. Thank you for your time. I'm done. Okay.
Thank you, Doug, and thanks for your support. Yeah, we've got to bring this part of it to a close. Let me just say, obviously, there's so much more we could have gone on here. But tonight, you haven't been listening to a panel of observers. You've heard a panel of architects who are really leading this whole AI wave that we're on. And it's fascinating. And, it's almost as if we've just barely touched the surface. And there's so many other things that I want to get into. But, the one thing that we come back to is just how quickly things are moving. The sense of evolution, of revolution, and how quickly it's happening. I think back, take chat. ChatGPT has been with us a little over 1,000 days. It has over 1 billion regular users. 1 billion. No one really knows where this is taking us. But one thing we do know is it's changing civilization as we know it. It really is changing things in a big way. And I hope that tonight we got just a taste, we've seen just the tip of the iceberg of that. The question is, will we rise to the challenge? Because I heard humans, we talked about human skills so much tonight, critical thinking and human skills. Will we rise to that challenge? So please join me in thanking Jessica, Luca, Stephen, and Michelle. Okay. There's obviously a lot of work which went into this behind the scenes, and Audrey and Anaël were our interlocutor on this, and again, many thanks to EDHEC for all the work that went into this as well. Okay. And I'd say thank you to you. Thank you for participating in this. This is what it's all about: learning, unlearning, and relearning.